Story 1. The Vacancy at Room 12. Most people think motels are just cheap places to spend the night. But sometimes, they're where people disappear. Tonight, I'll tell you 3 true motel horror stories that left ordinary people questioning whether they were ever truly alone. The first story happened at a roadside motel in Arizona. The Vacancy at Room 12. It happened in October 2022. My name is Daniel, and I drive across the country for work. That night, I had been on the road for almost 10 hours. Around 1:30 a.m., I spotted an old roadside motel with a flickering neon sign that simply read, "Vacancy." The parking lot was almost empty. Inside the office, an elderly man checked me in without saying much. Before handing me the key, he paused and quietly said, "If you hear knocking tonight, don't answer unless you called someone." I laughed, assuming it was his strange sense of humor. My room was number 14. As I unpacked, I noticed something odd. Room 12, directly across from mine, had police tape hanging from the door. The curtains were torn. The lights inside were off. I asked the manager about it. He stared at me for a moment before saying, "Nobody stays there anymore." That answer didn't make me feel any better. Around 2:45 a.m., I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard knock, knock. 3 slow knocks. I looked through the peephole. Nobody. The hallway was completely empty. Thinking it was kids playing around, I ignored it. 5 minutes later, the same 3 knocks. This time I opened the curtains just enough to look outside. Still nobody, but something caught my attention. The police tape on room 12 was moving, as if someone had just walked through it. Even though there wasn't anyone there, my stomach dropped. I locked the deadbolt and turned off every light in my room. Then, I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy. Walking toward my door, they stopped. Another 3 knocks. But this time, a whisper came through the door. "Wrong room." I froze. The voice sounded like it was only inches away. Without thinking, I looked through the peephole again. Nothing. Not a single person. Yet the whisper continued. Room 12. At that point, I grabbed my keys, rushed out the back exit, got into my car, and drove straight to the nearest gas station. The next morning, I called the motel, asking for a refund. The manager simply replied, "You stayed across from room 12, didn't you?" I asked him what had happened there. After a long silence, he finally answered, "A traveler was murdered in that room years ago. Guests still report hearing knocks, but the cameras never record anyone standing outside." I never went back. But even now, whenever someone knocks exactly 3 times, I never answer. The woman outside room 7. The first story was about strange knocks in the middle of the night. This next one happened at a small motel in Nevada, where a traveler saw someone outside his room, someone who should never have been there. My name is Ryan. 2 years ago, I was driving from Las Vegas to Reno after visiting some friends. It was almost midnight when I realized I was too tired to keep driving. I found a tiny roadside motel that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 1980s. The lobby smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke. The woman at the front desk handed me the key to room 7. As I walked outside, I noticed something strange. Every room had its porch light on, except mine. When I asked about it, the receptionist smiled awkwardly. The bulb burned out yesterday. I didn't think much of it. After locking the door, I took a shower and went to bed. Around 3:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside. Slow. Crunch. 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 Someone was walking back and forth in front of my room. I peeked through the curtains. Standing under the dim parking lot light was a woman wearing a long white dress. Her hair completely covered her face. She wasn't moving. She was just standing there. I assumed she needed help. As I reached for the doorknob, I remembered something. I had never heard anyone walk toward my room, only around it. I looked through the peephole instead. No one. Confused, I pulled the curtain aside again. She was back. This time, she was much closer, only a few feet away from the window. Her head slowly tilted toward me. Then, she smiled. Not a normal smile. It stretched impossibly wide across her face. My heart started pounding. I stepped away from the window and grabbed my phone. Just then, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Then a woman's voice whispered, "Please, let me in." I stayed silent. A few seconds later, another voice came from outside. A man's voice, loud and panicked. "Don't open the door." I jumped. The voices stopped. Everything became silent. The next morning, I ran to the office and asked the manager what had happened. His face immediately turned pale. He asked, "Did she ask you to let her in?" I nodded. He sighed. "You're not the first guest to say that." He told me years earlier. A woman had been murdered outside room 7 after begging another guest for help. No one opened the door. Since then, people staying in room 7 sometimes hear her asking to be let inside. But according to the security cameras, no one is ever standing there. I checked out immediately. To this day, whenever someone knocks on my door late at night, I always look through the peephole first, and even then, sometimes, I still don't answer. Part 3, Story 3. The Guest Who Was Never Checked In. The last story comes from a motel in rural Texas. Unlike the first two, this one wasn't about strange noises or someone outside the window. It was about a guest who officially never existed. My name is Ethan. Back in the summer of 2023, I was driving home after visiting family in Oklahoma. Around 11 p.m., heavy rain forced me to stop at an old roadside motel just outside a small town in Texas. The motel had only 12 rooms. The manager looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. He handed me the key to room 9 and said, "If you hear anyone in the hallway after midnight, stay inside your room." I thought it was another strange motel joke. I thanked him and went to bed. At exactly 2:08 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my door. They were slow, deliberate, almost as if someone was counting each step. Curious, I looked through the peephole. A tall man wearing a dark coat stood at the end of the hallway. His back was facing me. He wasn't moving. I figured he was another guest. I went back to bed. A few minutes later, someone tried my doorknob. Once, twice. Then, silence. I held my breath. The handle slowly turned again. Fortunately, the deadbolt held. Then a calm voice said, "Wrong room." The footsteps moved away. I waited several minutes before looking outside again. The hallway was empty. The next morning, I mentioned the man to the motel manager. His expression changed immediately. He asked, "What room did he come from?" "I don't know," I answered. "He was standing near room 11. The manager slowly shook his head. "Room 11 has been locked for 6 months. I laughed nervously. "So, another guest must have been staying nearby." He walked over to the reservation computer and turned the screen toward me. "You were the only guest here last night." I stared at the screen. Only one room was occupied. Room 9. Mine. Thinking he was joking, I asked to see the security cameras. He hesitated. Finally, he played the recording from 2:08 a.m. The footage showed the hallway exactly as I remembered it. My room. Room 11. The flickering lights. But there was no man. No footsteps. No one touching my doorknob. The only person visible was me, standing at my door, looking through the peephole, at an empty hallway. A cold feeling rushed through my body. I knew what I had seen. I heard the footsteps. I heard the voice. Yet the cameras recorded nothing. Before leaving, I asked the manager one final question. "Has this happened before?" He remained silent for a long moment. Then he quietly replied, "Every few months, someone reports seeing the same man. They always describe the same coat, the same voice, and the same words. Wrong room." I never stayed at another roadside motel after that night. The end. That's for today. Subscribe Ghost Fair YouTube channel for more interesting horror stories. Goodbye.